Well, we're going to get started with our first practical assignment for this course. And our first practical assignment is going to lay the foundation for the remaining practical assignments, both in this course and the follow-on, which is Info 366. We're going to use MariaDB to demonstrate some of the things that a DBA would typically do and to demonstrate a lot of the concepts with database management systems. So our first step is to install MariaDB. And in order to do that, we need to build a virtual machine. Now, what I've chosen for this class, what I think is going to work best, I don't want to waste a lot of time with building these virtual machines and so forth. So instead, I'm going to ask you to use Google Cloud. So if you have ever used Google Cloud, this first video is going to walk you through how to build your virtual machine in Google Cloud. Then I'll have another video, which is going to walk you through how to install MariaDB. Then I'll have another video that shows you how to set up the firewall so you can access MariaDB from external systems, and also some of the third-party tools that we can use to manage our MariaDB instance. And we can, of course, also use the command line to do that, which I'll show you how to do with SSH. And then in the last video, I'm going to walk you through how to build a sample schema into your database. And what I'm going to ask you to do at the end of all this for Blackboard is to submit a screenshot of one of these database management tools with your name on the database written in the command line somewhere. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that. So that's what I'm going to ask you to submit. So this is a relatively easy assignment because all we're doing is getting our environment ready so that we can jump in with both feet when we get to the next section of the course where we start to actually use this database management system to build our little databases and start managing our database. And then, of course, we're going to use this as the foundation for all the DBA skills that we're going to learn about later on as we go through the course. So let's get started. So first, I'm going to go to cloud.google.com. And if you've used Google Cloud before, you can feel free to skip this portion of the video. There'll be another video I'm going to upload, which will begin with, you already have your virtual machine built. Now let's go ahead and install our system. But if you're not sure exactly what to do or what version of Linux you want to install, then I would suggest just following through with this video. It's not going to take a whole lot of time. So I'm going to sign in with my Drexel account. So I've got a whole bunch of accounts here. So let me sign in with a different account. There it is. Use my Drexel account. Okay, so I'm now signed in to Google with my Drexel account. I'm going to go to my console. Now I've already set up my Google account. I just set up my Drexel account. I was using some other accounts, but you can see here I've got my free trial for 357 days left, and I've got a $300 credit. So if you've never used Google before, Google Cloud, you're going to have to set up your account. It is going to ask you for a credit card number, but I can assure you that it's not going to charge you until you go through that $300 or get to the end of the trial period, which is 365 days. So you don't feel like you're going to be spending a lot of money with Google Cloud for this class. Some of you may have already used Google Cloud before, so you already have an account. You may have already exceeded the number of days that you get for free, or the amount of money that you get for free when you sign up. And if that's the case, I can tell you that our virtual machines, as long as you remember to turn them off when you're not using them, we're not going to use a lot of virtual machine time here. So it's not going to cost a lot. I think I mentioned this in my other video. I think I spent $4 on my Google account when I was testing things for this course, just to see how things would work in Google Cloud. I toyed with the idea of using Azure or Amazon. Any one of those platforms would work. You can certainly build your machine, but all of my videos are going to be based on using Google. So if you're not sure how to do something and you're not confident with those environments, if I show you how to do something in Google, if you're not confident you'll be able to translate that into Amazon or Azure, then I would suggest using Google. So our first step is we are going to go over here to the compute engine. Yours might be in a different location. Mine's at the top because it's the one that I use the most. But we're going to go to compute engine, VM instances. And if yours is like mine, you haven't created a virtual machine yet, right? So you're going to have to click on create to create a new virtual machine. And we're going to have to give it a name. I'm going to make mine obvious. I'm going to call it Info 365. Oh, I forgot it's all lowercase in Google. So Info 365. I'm going to put _-1. I think it lets me use a dash. I'll just use the -1 because we might make additional machines later on. I'm going to leave the region and zone to whatever the default is. I don't really care about that. You can certainly leave this on one virtual CPU if you want, but it's going to cost you more money. I'm going to go to a micro machine, right? Because I really don't need a lot of processing time on this thing. We don't really need a lot of resources for this machine. You can see here it's about $4.28 a month to run it as a micro VM. As far as my boot disk, it's set to Debian GNU Linux 9. That's the default. You could use a different distro of Linux. If you learned CentOS, you can certainly use CentOS if you want. Um, you could also use, where is it? I think in this program they teach, it's not Debian. I'm trying to remember what they teach you guys. It's the open source version of Red Hat. And I can't recall the name of it. But if you're more familiar with the Red Hat version of Linux, you could certainly do that. I'm going to stick with the default with Debian because I know I can do everything that we need to do for this class with Debian. Um, all the standard stuff that we're going to need. The firewall commands. It's all going to work. And I'm just looking to see if, yeah, they've got Red Hat. Let me see. So I paused the video for a second. It looks like it looks like it is CentOS that most of the Drexel classes use. So I'm going to use CentOS 7 for my virtual machine. I think that should be fine. So we'll use CentOS. It's a Red Hat-based distribution. So Red Hat would also work. So I'm going to use CentOS 7. That's just the latest version that Google has that I can select in here. Down here, standard persistent disk is good. I'm going to change my size to 20 gigabytes just so I have plenty of space. You can leave it to 10 if you like, but you can always expand it later on. So we're going to select that. I don't need to allow HTTP or HTTPS traffic explicitly, but I'm going to go ahead and turn that on because it's going to create some base firewall rules for me that I can add to those firewall rules. It's a little bit easier in Google just to add to the ones that it creates for you. And that's it. So that's pretty much all the settings I need. And I'm going to go ahead and create my virtual machine. So then I get this screen and you see this little circle over here spinning around as it's trying to create my VM. So let's give that a minute and I'm going to wait for it to create. Then I'm going to walk you through how to make sure that you can access this virtual machine with something like PuTTY. So you can see up here I got some notifications. So it looks like it's trying to create my VM. So I'm just going to show you what's happening here. If I click, I got some notifications and it's telling me that the zone that I tried to create my machine doesn't have enough resources, and I hit retry and it's not letting me do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the machine again. Oops. Again, it's info 365. I'm going to call mine Maria DB. And I guess I'll switch this to something else. Maybe I'll try Iowa since the other one wasn't working. We're going to do a micro. We're going to change this to CentOS 7. I'm going to give it 20 gigs. I'm going to turn on HTTP and HTTPS. Let's see if this one works. All right, that worked. So I've got my machine running in Iowa now. So to access my machine, I can go over here and use the built-in client that works in your browser window. So I'll go ahead and do that first. So the way this works is it's using Google's authentication for your virtual machine. So you're SSHing using your Google account. But I don't necessarily want to use my Google account to access my machine when I install MariaDB because I want to have some local users in the OS. So the first thing is I don't know what the root password is on this machine, right? It's my machine, but there is no root password yet because I'm just using Google's mechanism. Now, theoretically, sudo works, right? So if I type sudo to run a command as the super user, it'll work. And just like any other command, I can use password, right? PASSWD is going to change the password for root. So I'm going to set a new password for root. I am going to set mine to something easy to remember. All right, so now I've got my, now I'm just going to use the su command so I can just run as root. They always tell you not to do this in your Linux classes, but I just think it's easier when I'm going to be doing some stuff. So the first thing I want to do, I want to be able to putty to this machine. I want to be able to use putty to access my virtual machine and not to have to use this browser-based thing. So I don't want to have to go into Google's console in order to access my VM. So to do that, I'm going to add my user account, right? I need to add a user account I can use to log in first. So in CentOS, I think we're going to use user add. All right, so I am going to, oops, I forgot to put the username. So I'm going to add a user and I'm going to call it, I'm just going to use my Drexel ID. You know what, that might be confusing because my Google account's my Drexel ID. So I'll just call it student, right? It's just be a regular user. I'm going to call it student. So that created the user account. I don't know if that's exactly what I want it to do though. Let's take a look. So now that we added this user account, we have to set a password because they won't be able to do anything without having a password. So we're going to use the password command. I don't have to put sudo in the front now because I'm already root right now. So I'm going to do password student. It's going to ask me for a new password. I'm just going to make it something easy for me to remember. Now I'm going to warn you that when you do this, when you change that root password, make sure it's something that you remember. That way it's easy to get into the system. Otherwise, you have to go in and reset that password by using the Google console, right? So you got to log into the Google console, access using the little widget in Google through the browser, and then you'll be able to go in and change the password if you want to using your Google account. All right, so now that we've added that user, our next step, so we have to give this, sorry, I bring the screen back up. We have to give this user access to sudo, right? So they can do stuff, you know, when you log in with PuTTY with SSH, you'll be able to do all the stuff you need to do using the sudo command. So to do that in CentOS, you put them in the wheel group. I just looked this up. I did this before with Debian, so I kind of have to look up some of this stuff as I go. So I'm going to use the user mod command. We're going to put them in the wheel group, and our user, in my case, is student. All right, so now I should be able to run the sudo command. The last step here, before we're done setting up this access with SSH, is I need to make sure that that SSH is enabled, right, and that we can log in with SSH. So we're going to look in the, let's see, there should be a folder for, or a directory rather, sorry, this isn't Windows, for SSHD. So let's see if we can find it here. There we have SSH, yep, so we're gonna cd to etc SSH. And if we look in there, there's an SSH config, so I'm gonna modify it using the vi command. This is just a basic text editor. Make sure you use sshd underscore config because ssh config is the client. We want to modify the config file for the server, not the client. So when I open that up, I've got a lot of options in here. What I'm looking for, however, is there should be an option to permit login. Let's see. There we go. Password authentication. We want to make sure that's set to yes. I'm just going to hit the X key one time. It'll remove that X. And then I'm going to put a, I'm going to hit the I key and put an X or a pound rather in front of password authentication. I'm still in insert mode, so I can come up here and delete the pound in front of challenge response yes, and put a pound in front of challenge response authentication no. So it's going to allow me to log in with a password. So it does two things. It allows you to use a password for login, and it allows SSH to prompt you for a password in order to log in. So when I do those, if I let me hit the escape key, that's going to get me out of insert mode. I'm going to hit the colon, W for write, Q for quit, the exclamation point so it doesn't ask me again. And it should have written that change. Now I need to restart the service. So it should be service restart SSHD. Sorry, I got it backwards. Service SSHD restart, that should work. All right, so it's service, SSHD, restart. That's going to restart the service. And now we should be able to use PuTTY to try to log into our virtual machine. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to come back over here to Google. There is my external IP, right? So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to open up PuTTY. If you don't already have PuTTY, it's a free open source SSH tool. So I'm going to copy my IP address in here. I'm going to call it info 365. Yep, MariaDB. And I'm going to save that. Right, so I've got this new item in here. For the appearance, I'm going to change the font so that it's easier for you to see it in my videos. You don't necessarily have to do this. So I'm going to use Lucida Console 16. I find for some reason that works best. I'm going to come back in here and save it. And then I'm going to open this. It's going to ask me if I want to accept the certificate. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to log in as student. Oops, I put the wrong password in. So let's try again. And I'm in. All right, so once you get to this stage, we should be able to use the sudo command. So I'm going to try changing the password for root again. There we go. I had to put the password for student in though. There we go. And I'm just going to Control C because I just validated that it works, so I know I can run the sudo command, which is good. It's just the first time I ran it, it gave me that little warning, but after that, it'll work fine. So now I know I've got the ability to get in with SSH. Now we're at a point where we can actually install MariaDB. So let me pause this video and we'll do another video where we install MariaDB and do some basic configuration.